Hi everybody and welcome to the most recent retro game console purchase that I made from the Retro Cavern, which was made about a month ago, but I only do these videos like twice a month, so I haven't had the chance to actually put much energy into this. So I bought this Atari 2600 Junior model, perfectly working. And I got a few games for it as well. The Atari 2600 was the first gaming console that you could play on a TV that I ever played in around 1983-84. I was about 2 or 3 years old at the time. And there was only one game that I remember playing on it. Maybe there were two games that the guy had who owned the console. But I only remember one game, which is going to be featured the first thing once I get to the games themselves. But you have to consider that Atari 2600 was one of the first consoles that ever got a proper emulator on the PCs. So that's already well over 20 years ago. So that already makes it nostalgic for me in more than one level. So here we go, the first 5 games for the Atari 2600. Enjoy.
Pac-Man. What a way to get introduced to TV games, as they were called back then. I was around 3 or 4 years of age when I first got to see and play this beast. Back then, it was mind-blowing, but you have to consider I had only played board games and electronic handheld games until that point, most of which were Nintendo's Game & Watch titles. I had no idea that the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man was considered a lousy port. I was ecstatic just to play something with a joystick and see things happening on the screen, making more bigger noises than a Game & Watch game ever would. Well, you live and learn, as they say, but the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man holds a special place in my heart regardless of the knowledge of how bad it is. There's a redeeming value of sorts in it. The Atari 2600 version was the first one for the character of Pac-Man to feature eyes. This, for me, is nostalgia tripping at its purest. A properly revered classic for the VCS is Yars Revenge, but I remember first being very dubious about its status when I came across it. Of course, you have to understand that apart from Pac-Man, I had no real experience on the machine before the emulators came along, so practically anything on the old Atari looked and felt unnervingly primitive compared to ZX Spectrum and Commodore 64 and their likes, not to mention the newer machines. In any case, after playing Yars Revenge for a while and learning its quirks and strategies, it does make for a very interesting game, and it certainly deserves its classic status. It's like a series of boss fights in an otherwise horizontally scrolling space shooter without the scrolling parts here. You start each battle from the left side of a barrier that divides the screen, and on the right side is your enemy, lurking behind a particles shield that you must get through. You are followed by a cursor of sorts, which acts as the targeting system for the enemy. I think there's some sort of a backstory here, and you and the enemy probably have names, but who cares really? So, once you get through the enemy's particle shield, you get yourself to the same horizontal level, so you can shoot the big cannon. Of course, this takes a bit of practice, but that's the beauty of the game. High entertainment value for short bursts, and a very recommendable Atari classic. Activision made their name initially on the 2600, practically just by being the first third-party game developer for the console, but they did release plenty of classic games like Boxing, Pitfall, Enduro, River Raid, Megamania, and Kaboom, along with many others. But my absolute favorite Activision game on the VCS has always been Keystone Kapers. I don't know exactly why so, but I guess it's part of my childhood and going for the cops and robbers routine. And also, it wasn't officially available for anything else than Atari machines, ColecoVision and MSX computers. And since it's an Atari 2600 original, the impact was made there. So, you take the role of the police officer Keystone Kelly, whose job it is to catch the thief called Harry Hooligan before he makes his escape from the multi-story department store. Although there's a lot of running left and right, the game is presented in a flip screen fashion, and each screen features its own hazards and other features. Although the majority of time will be spent in running towards each end of the map to reach an escalator, The middle of the department store map has an elevator, which can be helpful, but it requires careful timing because it moves on its own. Keystone Kapers is one of those never-ending arcade games that will last as long as you're able to. Happily, the game is a constant challenge, and if you play it rarely enough, it will retain good replay value for many years. One of the earliest survival horror games is Atari's Haunted House, a VCS exclusive released in February 1982. The idea is to walk around a dark, haunted mansion and find 3 pieces of an urn. But there are all sorts of evil things lurking around, which are obviously dangerous, but can be warded off with a scepter, and doors are locked which need keys to unlock them. The items can only be seen if you have a match lit, so you can see a small radius around yourself, but the matches only last for a short period of time, and are snuffed out at the entrance of any monster. So it takes a lot of caution and careful exploration of the 3-story and a basement-sized mansion to get through your mission. Regardless of the shortness of the game, I mean, it's an Atari 2600 game, so it's only to be expected. There are 9 difficulty levels, each level obviously more challenging, so it offers a nice challenge for a while. Being such an early example of a particular genre, it's an interesting artifact in gaming archaeology, but it's also a pretty good game to get back into every now and then. While the majority of the most well-known Atari 2600 games were undoubtedly made by Atari or Activision, another software house called iMagic made their mark with unusually shaped cartridges and a few classic titles such as Atlantis, Cosmic Ark, Demon Attack, and Shooting Gallery. But Dragonfire has long been my favorite game from iMagic, and while it was released for a rather surprising variety of platforms, the Atari version was the original. I might actually do a comparison of this someday, now that I'm kind of considering getting back to doing that again. And the reason why I've always liked Dragonfire is that it's such a different kind of a concept from everything else that I've played on the 2600. The game progresses in series of 2 screens. 1, you cross a bridge that has arrows flying at you from within the castle into which you're trying to get. And 2, you run around a screen collecting randomly placed treasure items while a dragon is blowing fireballs at you from the bottom of the screen, in a similar style to how you are thrown bombs at in Kaboom. And once you've collected all the treasure, a door appears from which you can proceed into the next castle, which is slightly more difficult. And that's pretty much it. Like all the best early Atari games, it's simple but addictive, and as a bonus, it has certain singular character about it that just keeps drawing me back to it. It's a proper nostalgia trip game.